it. Awesome. Great. Thank you. Good morning. This is the third meeting of the working group on the status of libraries in Vermont. Why did it public libraries in there? Sorry, are we recording? Maybe we could start over there. Good morning. This is the third meeting of the working group on the status of libraries in Vermont. This is a meeting that will focus primarily on collections. Our last meeting was on programming, and we heard testimony about that. We are receiving written testimony on both of these topics, and we will continue to receive written testimony on those topics. If members of the library community or public have testimony that they would like to submit, please go to our working group page on the Department of Libraries website. You can find essentially all of the information that you will need about the working group there on that page, including minutes and recordings of previous meetings. Today we are looking at testimony from 10 until 12, and then we will take a recess from 12 to 2. And then we have additional testimony from roughly 2 to approximately 2:45, and then we will have an opportunity for public comment or comment from the board about additional comment about testimony perhaps we've heard today or other issues, and then finally we will have some administrative time at 3:15 today. So we've got a full agenda. Any working group business or discussion before we get started today? We've got a few minutes here before our first person is scheduled.
Yes, Tom?
Yes.
This is Jeanette. I do have a question about when our positions on each of the topics will actually be written. Who takes the lead on that? What the process is? I'm concerned that if we wait past the month that testimony is taken, it won't be fresh in anybody's mind. Unless someone from the Department of Libraries has written a draft of position on programming, that's already been 2 months away. So I'm a little concerned about what the process will be for our final work product.
I think that's a legitimate concern, and your point is well taken. Any other comment from the board about this? Thoughts? Susan?
I think that's a really good point, but it's also true that we have all of the transcripts and we do have the recordings to go back over to review things when we need to. I love to do things when they're fresh in my mind, but I also feel like we might get a better, bigger picture if we go through all of the topics, because nothing stands alone. Everything will be related throughout this, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. We do have 2 years, not 2 years left, but 2 years total to create this report. I think there's certainly a case to be made in either direction that we should begin certainly working on a report. We could potentially begin to put together the basic structure of such a report. I think the bill, which I think was appropriate, is kind of open-ended about the content of the report. Clearly, there's the trust given to the working group to be able to manage that and put it together, et cetera. So, yeah, I think this is something that we should consider and perhaps bring back at the end of the meeting about how we might begin writing the report and I do believe that there is value in freshness. It's one thing to have the feelings that you have as you're hearing people and being able to translate those into a report. The thoughts, the immediacy of that. I think Jeanette is correct in that it can be a little difficult to recapture that after the fact, even with the recording. So to that extent, I think there is value in trying to begin writing the report. But I also want to be cognizant of the fact that because of the structure of the working group and the position of the state librarian in this group, I am feeling like as the person setting the agenda, collecting the testimony, that I do not want to be the person completely directing this process. This really needs to be a group process. And I think there's obviously a tremendous amount of capability, experience, interest on this working group. And so I don't want to short circuit that in any way by kind of taking command of writing that. So let's talk about that at the end of the meeting. Give it a little thought today as we hear folks. We do have about 3 minutes before our first person is scheduled. Peter Langilla is scheduled at 10:15. I don't see that he is here yet, so we'll give him a few minutes. Just thinking about other business, folks have been able to file their reports with us in terms of expenses related to this. No problem with that. Yep. Okay, good. If you have questions about that, contact me or Josh Muse. We'll be able to help you with that. Otherwise, nothing comes to mind immediately. Any other thoughts from the working group? No? Okay. I could go into a little more detailed look at the agenda today. So Peter Langilla will be testifying at 10:15. Wendy Sharkey is right here. Will be testifying at 10:30. Francis Binder. I'm sorry, Meg. You're muted.
It's Binder.
Binder. Okay, great. So she'll be at 10:45. 11 o'clock, we'll take a short break and come back at 11:15. Karen McCullough will testify. Hi, Karen. Randall Smathers will testify at 11:30. Susan O'Connell, hi, Susan, will testify at 11:45. Then at noon, we'll take a recess until 2 o'clock. At 2 o'clock, Margaret Woodruff will testify. 2:15, Mary Danko. 2:30, Lisa Samet. And then at 2:45, we will have additional testimony from anyone who maybe didn't get a chance to respond in time before the meeting, or who has submitted testimony since our deadline of January 4th for the capability to be recorded in this meeting. So if you've submitted testimony and would like to say something at 2:45, you're certainly welcome to do that. And then we will kind of open the floor if there's any public comment. And then finally at 3:15, we will take some administrative time, perhaps even setting the date for the next meeting, which should be in March, which would be nice if we could do that today. So if you have your calendars available, that would be great. If there are any members of the working group that can't stay for the entire time or can't make the afternoon session, if you could email me or post in the chat. Well, why don't you email me your dates that you might be available around mid-March. I think Fridays tend to work. I feel like there was some consensus on that at our last meeting. So unless something has changed, and I know that things do change, we will continue to have these on Friday in this similar format. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about dates. But if anyone in the working group has to leave, just email me the Fridays, around mid to late March that you're available. Okay, I think we're coming right up on 10:15. Is Peter here yet? Not yet. Okay, we'll give him another minute. This is where the director does this, right? So, it's going to be very cold tonight. Hope you got your wood in and your heat's going, and everyone's prepared for that. So, it's a beautiful day. The sun is out. It's a good day to hear some testimony. So, oh, Jeanette, you have your hand up. Do you have something you want to mention?
Just filling time with a bit of an administrative request. On the Google Docs area where all of the testimony is posted,
Yes.
if someone, I guess at your end, could, for a title on each of those, put the person who submitted its name. I mean, that's in the case in about half of these. The other half are just entitled Library Working Group. And if you're looking for a particular person's testimony, it's very hard to find it unless their name is there.
That's a great point. I think one of the things that we need to do on our webpage for the working group is actually post all that written testimony. And I was just realizing that we hadn't done that this morning. So I will see to it that we do that. And then that way there'll be a better kind of public point for that, as that doesn't really exist other than what we've been hearing in the meetings. So yeah, that's a good point, and
Thank you.
that works. Okay. Meg, that's fine. I think, again, this is a long meeting, so to the extent that we can be here, that's great, and we will have a quorum of working group meeting members through the whole meeting today, so I think we're good. Peter here yet? Try to be considerate of folks who are in schools, especially, or librarians who are working in a public service situation. So I'm sure that Peter has reasons for not being here just yet. So we'll give him a moment.
Yeah, I'll go check my cell and see if he's sent me a text on that, so I'll be right back.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, this is probably as good a time as any to let folks know that a new state librarian has been hired, and that we expect to see a press release sometime today about that. If not today, certainly early next week. So we're looking forward to seeing that press release. There's Pete. Hi, Peter. Good morning.
Morning, Tom and everyone. Sorry, I was having some connectivity issues, so I'm glad I was able to make it in.
Yeah, completely understandable. I'm so glad you could be here. Why don't you introduce yourself? And then you can either do one of two things. You can read your testimony if you like. Hopefully we've all read that. Or you can summarize it. Or you can talk about whatever you like, but it's as long as it relates to the topic today, which is collection.
Sure, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Peter Langilla. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a librarian at Champlain Valley Union High School in Heinsberg. I'm also the past president of Vermont School Library Association, and I also teach the designing curriculum course in the University of Vermont's School Library sequence. What I'd like to do today in regards to collection is, rather than talk about statistics, I'd like to talk about content, access, and the collection flowing out from the library to be part of the school curriculum. And so the first thing I'll do is read an excerpt from a recent statement on intellectual freedom that the Vermont School Library Association put out back in November. And so here it goes. It says that our national standards from the American Association of School Librarians say that school libraries must facilitate opportunities to experience diverse ideas by promoting the use of high quality and high interest literature in formats that reflect the diverse developmental, cultural, social, and linguistic needs of all learners and their communities. That's the end of the quote. Building diverse collections and building diverse and inclusive collections is one of our core values. And we want to make it clear that books and materials that represent, honor, and affirm all races, ethnicities, genders, sexualities, abilities, languages, religions, classes, immigration statuses, and more must be present in every Vermont school library. Going further, these books and materials are essential resources for learning and life. Author Roxane Gay, in her book Bad Feminist, said that stories have given me a place in which to lose myself. They have allowed me to remember. They've allowed me to forget. They've allowed me to imagine different endings and better possible worlds. That's the end of the part of the statement I'll read. And I think that right there is the key thing that at least I'm trying to do, and I know many, many, many other Vermont librarians and schools are trying to do, is create collections that honor, represent, and affirm our students and our communities. So a few examples of how that's changed the way that we've purchased books and the way that we've built our collections over the past several years. We have a lot of manga. Students love manga. They find that they're seeing themselves in those stories. They're able to access them. There is an amazing intuitive learning that happens when you're looking at something in a comic format. That learning that happens when you're having to make sense of the words and the pictures at the same time. We have enhanced our collection of books that are in other languages, both with a dual purpose, both so that students who are learning languages can access fiction and nonfiction and not just classroom text, and then also so that our students whose home languages are something other than English, so that they can access reading materials that are engaging and fun and whatever their purpose is there as well. Something else that we've done is that we have made it possible that there are no fines, there are no checkout limits, and we actually have created self-checkout stations because we know that in order for those students, sometimes when we're talking about that idea of representing, honoring, and affirming who they are, sometimes that means that they're not comfortable coming and talking with the librarians. Even though we try to create as safe an environment as possible, we know that we actively have to work toward that the library is not safe and our collection is not safe just because it exists. And so by allowing for self-checkout, we are empowering our students to make the library their own, to be able to access it on their terms when they want to, without someone watching or checking or being a gatekeeper. And so really when you think about all of those things, we are doing that representing, honoring, and affirming work. And especially going back to the quote from the VSLA statement, all of those protected statuses, we are trying to make sure that our library makes up for the lack of those books being published in the past by using our purchasing power to make sure that the vast majority of our new books are books that are representing, honoring, affirming the identities of everyone. So that's all I'll say. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to talk about what I think is the key part of collection development right now.
Thanks, Peter. Questions from the working group? Meg has a question.
Hi, Peter. Thank you for that powerful, powerful testimony. You mentioned at the beginning something about the library's collection influencing the school curricula. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Sure. Thanks, Meg. So I think that while we can do a good job with displays and with programming to make sure that the books and materials and resources that we have are flowing out into school, we also need to work as librarians to make sure that we're partnering with all of the various departments to make sure that all of those resources are becoming part of their curriculum, and we can actually create our own opportunities to take that into our own hands. So, for example, both Christina Deely, my colleague at CVU, and I teach our own classes. Christina teaches kind of hybrid social studies classes where the focus is learning about history through all of the new, relatable, engaging books that are being produced, predominantly by people from historically marginalized identities. I teach a creative writing workshop in partnership with the English department that is a lot of the same, is based on choice and theme-based reading using those same texts. I also teach a class called Social Justice Think Tank based on the social justice standards from Learning for Justice, where students do deep identity work before researching about injustices through the books in the library, and then creating their own social justice action project to try to make a positive impact on their community.
Meg, you're muted. No, it's frustrating. Oh no, you're muted again. There you are.
Okay. Thank you, Peter. It really is inspiring what you and Christine Deely are doing up at CVU. I know you're also doing stuff with Project Lit and connecting students, through diverse text through that program. So you are an inspiration to other school libraries throughout the state, and your leadership, you and Christine's leadership, is to be noted. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Meg. Just to quickly mention that, so Project Lit is a nationwide book club. What we've done is we've expanded it from being just a book club. We do still have the book club version where we have two 30-minute blocks a week where students come and participate in a book club. But then we've partnered with 9th and 10th grade humanities classes where all the list of dozens and dozens of amazing Project Lit books become an embedded unit where we go down to their areas and we participate in reading groups with those students. And so we have at CVU in 9th grade, we have each student participates in a core where they share the same English, social studies, science, math, and wellness teachers. And there's also an embedded special educator. And then if we go down and partner with one of these 9th grade cores, that then brings 8 adults who can participate in anywhere from 8 to 16, depending on how we do it, reading groups at a time. And so students are engaging with the world through these really amazing books as part of these reading communities. And it's a way to really have a positive relationship with literature in a setting that is not tied to grades and kind of the conventional curriculum. And then also they're reading engaging books at the same time. So it's a really positive way to access the books in a more formal classroom setting.
Peter, I'd like to kind of take this to the next step, which is clearly you are deeply engaged with this. It's great to hear you talk about this, and I feel your passion about this. I would like to know from you, obviously your testimony today and everything that you're saying will be part of what's recorded for this working group. One of the charges of this working group is to try to make that next step, which is to say, you're doing this work, how could this model be expanded to other schools? How could, what do you think is the way forward statewide for what you're talking about?
I think that there are two main parts to that. I think the first part comes from a statewide leadership perspective. School libraries have not been part of the Agency of Education since 2003, when the former leader there, Lita Schubert, retired. The state got rid of the school library liaison position, put us under education technology, and has refused multiple advocacy efforts to bring a position back. So I think if there was someone there who could be really, because even though technology is a large part of our job, and especially depending on what school you're at. Some people are the tech person, the tech integrationist, the digital learning leader, whatever they happen to call it. But there's also this whole other part of our job that is often being ignored in the curriculum at those conversations at the agency of education level. And so I think that's part of it. We need to continue advocating to get leadership back at that table. And then the other part of it happens in the school buildings. One of the reasons why I've been able to do some creative things in regard to integrating the library into the larger curriculum is the gift of staffing and time. So we have 2.5 full-time, 2.5 certified licensed librarians in our building at CVU. We have 1,300 students. We're the largest school in the state, so sometimes it evens out. But having those people in the building, along with a support staff member, allows us the freedom to be doing the creative things that I'm talking about, rather than doing all of the administrative clerical work all the time. We chip away at that. We all share that, but it's not our entire job. Whereas many librarians are on an island by themselves doing the clerical administrative work that it takes to just keep the library going day to day, and they don't have the freedom and autonomy to be working on programming and curriculum. And so I think getting that, there's the language in the educational quality centers that says each school that has 300 students must have at least one full-time librarian and sufficient support staff for all the things we do. Many schools ignore that and sufficient support staff, and actually Meg, I know, has these statistics that she could share with the working group, where over the past 10 years, something like 10% of librarian FTE has gone away, which mostly relates to declining enrollment of the student population, yet almost 50% of school library support staff FTE has disappeared. And so school districts have really minimized what their library programs are capable of doing because they're not supporting the professionals with the support staff to allow them the freedom to expand their roles in their buildings.
So let librarians be librarians and not
Correct.
have to spend their time doing non-librarian stuff.
Right. And unsurprisingly, it relates to the equity issues that face the state in many categories. Our rural schools, it's more of a problem. Our schools with higher percentages of students in poverty, it's more of a problem. Our schools with higher percentages of English language learners, this is a larger problem. So it really aligns with the systemic inequities that exist in our state and many other areas. It's affecting school libraries as well.
Yeah, we certainly see that in public libraries where we have people on an island who are performing all of the tasks of managing not only the library functions, but the building as well. So, yes, great. Any other questions for Peter before we move on?
Yes, I would like to ask Peter about where he's finding all these books that he's buying to fill in the gaps in the collection, and when and how he will know when the collection has reached an equity, so it reflects truly on the community that it's serving.
Yeah, thanks for that question. Well, so we buy about 75% of our books through a partnership with the Flying Pig bookstore in Shelburne, and so we are, and we're using the same traditional ways to find out which books are coming out, all of the journals and things like that. But then we're also expanding and making sure that we're using social media a lot. We make sure that we know about authors who the students are following on TikTok and Instagram, and making sure that we're getting those voices into our collection. I don't know if I could answer, especially right now, about when we will know when the collection is equitable. I know that if you did so we use Fall at Destiny, so say we did the technical title-wise collection report, it would say that our newer books I don't even think these markers exist in something like that, but I think it would say that our books purchased in the last 5 years on different, diversity and equity markers, and we'd be doing better. And obviously our older books would be skewing more toward, white male Eurocentric authors. But when you look at a school like mine is, so I serve Shelburne, Charlotte, Heinsberg, St. George, and Williston. We are 92% white. We are 88% who do not need free or reduced lunch. We are only about 1.5% English language learner. So we are one of the most, we are an extremely white, affluent district for Vermont. And so I would argue that, and I've actually done some research on this with Meg Allison, I would argue that we have a long way to go because whiteness and cisgender maleness has permeated so much of the collection for so long that we need to take this turn away from that. And of course, we're still purchasing great books by authors who hold those identities, but in numbers that are not as large as the books that we're trying to use equity to account for the centuries and decades of the table being weighted in such a way that it's going to take a long time to make up for that. So I guess that would be as close to an answer as I have on that one.
Any other questions for Peter before we move on? No? Okay, I want to be cognizant of the time. Thank you so much, Peter, for joining us, and please feel free to stay for as long as you can.
Thank you,
all
Peter.
for the work you're doing. I appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity.
Next up on our agenda is Wendy Sharkey. Wendy, if you'd like to introduce yourself, and then same instructions. Feel free to address your testimony in any way you like.
Okay, so I'm Wendy Sharkey. I work at the Bennington Free Library. Part of my remit is to purchase the adult fiction. So I have quite a good handle on the adult fiction, if nothing else. And today I'm going to read my testimony. Traditionally, libraries have held a collection of books, but now they are so much more than just books. Yes, they still have books, both regular, large print, but they also have DVDs, audiobooks, non-traditional items, and downloadable and streaming services. Books still make up the majority of the collection here in Bennington, with 55,000 books accounting for about 64% of the physical circulation numbers. 3,500 DVDs account for another 33% of circulation figures. Audios with 3,400 collection account for about 2% of the circulation numbers, and non-traditional items make up the balance of the circulation numbers. Our non-traditional collection includes area passes, snowshoes. These have been so popular that we are increasing the number of snowshoes we have this year. A telescope, a backpack with binoculars and nature books, puzzles, a moisture meter. And in the children's room, we have backpacks with books and manipulatives. Most of these are bulky and do not fit on traditional bookshelves. Libraries are not built to house these non-traditional items, so although we'd like to expand our holdings to include things like ukuleles, cake pans, garden tools, and seeds, we first of all have to come up with a storage space to figure out access for other patrons. Downloadable and streaming collections have a small but loyal following. They are a way to expand our collection to the computer savvy among our patrons. Hoopla has been popular. Most users maximize their allowable checkouts each and every month. Overdrive, Libby have a steady stream of users. Patrons are not keen on the long wait hold times, followed by the necessity for an instant download. We did used to offer RB Digital, but now it is no more. So we eagerly look forward to the new offering through the state. We are fortunate here in Bennington to have a dedicated Vermont history room to house the library's special collection of Vermontania, the materials on local and New England history. Due to our geographic location, we also spill into some New York locations, ones that are close at hand. These items do not circulate, but patrons and visitors are welcome to browse the shelves, and most of the items housed in the room are visible in our catalogue. Highlights of the Vermont History Collection include Town of Bennington National Register of Historic Places Sites and Structures Survey, Urban Sites and Structures Survey, the Rural Sites and Structures Survey, Vermont State Yearbooks, local high school yearbooks, and subjects files maintained on topic related to Bennington County and Vermont. Last year, we had our high school yearbooks digitised. As part of the Catamount Library Network, we already share our catalogue with 21 libraries from around the state. This is an excellent way to increase the selection for our patrons. Patrons can place holds on other libraries' items as long as they are not classed as new. The staff from many do so on behalf of the patron. All members of Catamount Library Network are in our courier service, which we find invaluable. On an average month, Bennington will ship out about 400 items and receive slightly less. A shared catalogue comes with its drawbacks as well as its advantage. Duplicate records in the catalogue make it harder for patrons to locate a specific copy of an item. With at least 21 different cataloguers adding items, all with different levels of knowledge and consistency of records, is varied. To fix a catalogue of all duplicates and to ensure consistent records takes time that a busy cataloguer generally does not have. The importance of training all cataloguers so that only good records are added to the catalogue is essential. For those hard to find items, and as a last resort, we go to Clover. There are very few items that get requested on Clover, and many of those are unique specialist items. Only very rarely are we unable to fill the patron's desires. Since I started my current position, I have been in charge of the fiction collection at Bennington, and I have been attempting to diversify the collection. After having been curated by the same person for 30 plus years, the whole collection seemed to be very one note, either mystery or romance, usually with a cast of white characters. With any project, it is necessary to measure your baseline, so any changes you make can be quantified. I have made some inroads towards a more diverse collection by first weeding out dated, unused and broken books, and then adding a diversity collection code to the whole collection database to ensure easier define that growing collection and to follow the usage statistics. I have spent the last 3 years looking for diverse titles, and finally I'm ready to start a full diversity audit of the collection. This will not be a quick process as each and every title needs to be analysed. I feel that this could be a wonderful project for a student. Our patron demographic spans all ages. However, there's a larger number at either end of the scale. Our more mature patrons enjoyed browsing the shelves and had a hard time during lockdown. Although we offered to select some books for them, we were very seldom taken up with it on our offer. Our very young patrons enjoy coming to the library to use the manipulatives and enjoy the displays and activities that are featured each and every month. Patrons with children are more inclined to check out materials for the children than themselves. And that is the end of my written testimony. Is there any questions?
Yeah, there's a lot to process there. Thanks for reading that. I want to give the group the opportunity to ask questions. Andy, you have a question?
Yep. Thanks, Wendy, for your testimony. I think this is going to be the question I ask a lot today because it came up in multiple testimonies, and I want to sort of get a sense for how other people. You do a great job of listing the items in the collection and the quantities relative digital and physical. Do you have any information about circulation of one or the other? I'm just curious about percentages of use and to see, because what I've seen in the testimony is that most people are saying print is circulating at a higher rate than digital materials.
That's true, it is. But the thing is, digital access to digital collections is newer, and you have to have a certain computer savvy in order to access that. Bennington has, we serve a lot of older patrons, And so a lot of them, there's quite a few that don't even have computers, let alone access to digital, and they're not of an age where they want to learn anything new. So yes, there's a slow and steady use of digital materials, but it's nowhere near the amount that the actual physical materials are circulated.
And just so I'm clear, like you do attribute a large percentage of that to the general age of your patrons.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's interesting to hear, and totally, like, I mean, my mother managed to figure it out. How, I'm not sure. She's not the most tech-savvy woman in the world, but she certainly has. The other thing I was curious about is
approximately 2/3 of our circulation is in adult materials, and only 1/3 is generally in the children's materials. So, if that helps.
Yeah, no, thank you. The other question I had relates to collection development policies and your comments about your predecessor's interests. Has there been a formal collection development policy, like a comprehensive one in Bennington, or was it really just a personal choice and framed by that individual's interests?
There is a policy. It is not a detailed policy, I must say. The purchase of books is driven by obviously partially by the person who's buying it. I would say that that's true everywhere. It is also driven in part in Bennington by our patrons. We have quite a few who will come in and physically request an item to be purchased. And as long as funds and we think it's going to fit, then we have no problem with doing so.
Okay, one last thing, and I apologize. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I have been making a definite attempt to diversify the collection. Finding adult materials outside the norms are difficult, to say the least. You can the young adults, the children's, it seems to be easier. For adult literature, it is hard. But I think that's going to be driven by, like Peter said, but the purchasing power of people. The more people who show an interest in that subject matter, the more books will actually appear on that.
And one last thing, which is something else I've seen come up in numerous of the submitted testimony examples, reference access. A lot of people talked about a decline in print reference works and an increase in digital reference works. Is that the case in Bennington too?
It is. We still have a fairly large reference collection, physical reference collection, but it is not the same size as it used to be by a long stretch. We do have access to some wonderful online materials, and the thing with that is there's a reference librarian on staff at all points, so no matter who comes into the library, if they need assistance getting hold of that online materials, then they can do. Online materials are more up to date. They're instantaneously up to date, as opposed to the print materials, which are basically a year out of date by the time you get them on the shelves in any case. So yes, a declining reference collection with a database increase to go with it.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the time.
Kelly, I see you have a question for Wendy.
Hi, Wendy. My question it's a kind of a two-part question. Do you guys offer like one-on-one tech training for people at your library?
The simple answer to that is yes, we do. We ask that patrons actually book a time to do it so that we can ensure that we have a dedicated member of staff to do it. It usually happens on a Thursday because we can have one member of reference staff to do the training and another one to help with any other problems that might come up, any other queries that might come up.
Okay, and is that just on the computer, or will you also do it like on a smartphone or on a tablet?
We will do it, we will attempt to do it on anything that the patron brings in.
Okay, because we found here in Colchester that a lot of our older patrons, they access the digital media on their smartphones. Their children have bought it for them, and the audiobooks are our highest circulating digital material, and it's mostly on the smartphones. And they'll come in a handful of times to have us kind of walk them through it before they can do it on their own. But you know, we've really marketed that pretty heavily, and you know, most people, I don't know about where you are, but most people have a smartphone, so that might help. So I was just curious if that was something that you guys do offer.
We do offer that, yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Susan, you have a question?
Yes, I'm interested in your experience with the Catamount Network. It sounds as though a lot of the book requests that your patrons are making are going through Catamount rather than through Clover, which is interesting to hear. And I'm curious, particularly with an older population that isn't all that computer savvy necessarily, are most of those requests happening? Are those patron initiated requests, or are many of those requests that are coming to the librarian and then the librarian is placing that request?
Okay, we do allow patron initiated holds, and about 2/3 of the patron initiated holds are done by the patrons themselves. The others are done by the staff members when the patrons come into the library and request that we place them. We're more than happy to do that for them. There was another part to the question. I'm sorry.
No, I think you covered it there. I'm curious whether patrons are comfortable with that. Does it take them some time to figure that out, or is it a user-friendly environment so that they're quickly able to catch on how to take care of that?
It is easy. Well, as long as they have access to a computer, the internet at home or somewhere else, then it's easy. It requires just their log on and a single click. The system is set up so that they're not allowed to put holds on things that they're not allowed to put holds on. So it only shows them what they can place a hold on. They can select it, and the system does everything else for them. And it makes an easy way. It doesn't mean that you have to wait for a staff member to put it on for you, which actually speeds the process of them getting the book.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. I want to be cognizant of time. I know that some of our witnesses giving testimony today are on a schedule, so we're running a few minutes late. We should be able to make that up here during our break. So thank you again, Wendy. It's very interesting, and glad you were able to present that. Frances Binder is next on our list. Frances, are you ready?
Yes, hi. I'm sorry for my noisy entrance. I thought I was muted.
Oh, I didn't even notice. So please introduce yourself. Let us know who you are, and you can present your testimony however you like. You can read it, summarize it, or talk about it more generally. So whatever you like.
Great. So my name is Frances Binder, and I've been the school librarian at Colchester High School since the fall of 2019. Before that, I was at Milton Middle School. Here in Colchester, I serve just over 700 students from the town of Colchester primarily, but we also have some students from the sending towns in the Champlain Islands and Georgia. Our in-house collection consists of over 8,000 print copies and is made up of about 40% fiction and 33% informational and narrative nonfiction, and the remainder of the collection is comprised of our professional collection, biographies and memoirs, story collections, graphic novels, and a few other small special collections. The average age of our fiction is about 10 years, and the average age of our nonfiction collection is about 18. We're very active in Clover, both as borrowers and lenders, and we find that the ILL system works quite well for us in general. Our one big wish with the ILS system would be that the schools could participate in the courier service. Currently, we're a little bit limited. Certain libraries who only work through the courier system can't lend to us. And our local library, Colchester, the Burnham Library, we lend and borrow with them, but it does mean that either myself or my library assistant have to make a trip on our own time to go to the library to pick those books up or return books, which we are happy to do to get those books in the hands of our students, but it does take a bit of a toll on our personnel time and resources. One major strength of our collection, I think, is the fact that we are adequately staffed, and I say adequately, not amply staffed. But I have come from a library where I was the sole librarian and teaching almost a full teaching schedule and trying to serve 1,100 students. So compared to that, this is an adequate staff. I have one full-time librarian myself and one full-time library assistant. We are also blessed with an adequate budget. So those are two big strengths. That allows us to do things like a large-scale EDIS audit of our fiction collection, which we worked on last year, and ongoing work in collection development, routine selection and deselection procedures, regular research and curation of additional digital resources, and continuing processes around we implemented new procedures for ongoing EDIS audits of all of our book orders moving forward and all of our resource orders. We've also been able to expand our digital offerings, adding some new research databases and some digital audio solutions, among other things. And that all points to another strength, which is, again, our adequate budget. Some areas for improvement in our collection include the need to update our nonfiction collection. Obviously, an average age of 18 years, it's pretty dated. And last year we did complete a large deselection process in the nonfiction section, and we're in the process this year of starting to update the collection. It's also in great need of an EDIS audit, which is in process this year as well. In addition to our print collections, we also offer access to many digital audiobooks and ebooks through the Vermont Schools Shared Digital Collection. Our students tend to prefer print materials, though, so I do offer those materials, those digital materials, when like a popular title is out, but most students will request an interlibrary loan over using the digital version. The digital collections are primarily used by students when they are assigned to use them, though some students did use those collections during our remote and hybrid learning times. We offer access to e-audio and enhanced e-readers through a service, ebooks, audiobooks, and enhanced e-readers through a service called Tumblebooks, and those titles do see some use through our special education department. We also curate a collection of playaways and a small collection of individual MP3 players, which I purchase audiobooks for through Libro FM. And these collections are primarily used by our students who have various reading or learning challenges and need access to texts in a different way. Our collection of audiobooks offers a mix of popular titles as well as titles which are often assigned by classes, and I have collaborated and continue to collaborate with our humanities department in particular to ensure that books they use for group reads are available in a range of formats for the students. We did used to circulate some digital cameras, microphones, some AV equipment, but those items are now all housed and circulated by our IT department. We do still have a few external DVD drives, some headphones, computer chargers, some boards, games, things like that, but those are not formally circulated. They're not cataloged. They're just kind of available for students to borrow. As I look at our collections, I see a lot of overlap in what I'd consider our biggest challenges and our most important goals. We're continuously assessing our collections for diversity, inclusivity, and representation, and we really strive to provide students with the fullest range of stories and voices. We also strive to have this work reflected not just in our collection, but in our physical and digital spaces, in our programming, our displays, and in our own ongoing professional learning. And we work to be consistently aware and responsive to the changing technologies and resources that are available to our students, and to continue to seek out student input and teacher input to discover how we can use our resources and expertise to best serve our students. We aim to strike the right balance with our collection of educational support and research support, and also just plain trying to nurture a love of reading for fun. Our multiple roles as school librarians, which the ALA names as instructional partner, teacher, leader, information specialist, and program administrator, really require a large amounts of ingenuity and flexibility from all of us. And additionally, we are tireless advocates for our programs as we really try to work to shift this perception of libraries as extra to libraries as essential parts of our students' growth and learning experiences. In my experience, this continues to be one of the biggest ongoing challenges that school librarians and library programs face. And meeting these challenges for me has been a matter of engaging in conversations with other school librarians, idea and resource sharing widely with colleagues across the state and farther afield. I do a lot of reading and learning independently and work to build and deepen relationships with the colleagues in my school and district, and also seeking out lots of opportunities for professional development and growth. The last challenge I would speak to has to do with just plain space. We have seen in the last few years, we lost our library classroom. We lost about half of our storage space. And so, and of course, the library is used by so many different groups for so many different things. It's a breakout space, it's a classroom space, it's a hangout space, it's all kinds of things. And so right now, you know, in order to, let's say, have a class come in or offer a program, I have to close the library for general use. So there's a real push and pull with how the space gets used, and the ability to provide even more resources, you know, figuring out where to house those resources without losing the space for our students to work or read or hang out together. That's a tricky balance as well. So that's it for my sort of formal testimony, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Francis. Very interesting. I have a question, but I see that Kelly has her hand up, so I will let her go ahead.
Francis, I saw that in your and Rebecca's testimony both that you had mentioned because the courier service between the public library and the schools had stopped since COVID, it had made partnering or borrowing from us difficult. Would you guys be interested in having the library drop off materials? Would that be easier for you guys?
Yeah, I think any way that we could, you know, split that would be fabulous, Kelly. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we're always looking for expansion, creative solutions around the courier system. So I would also suggest a discussion with April Shaw in our department. We're always interested in issues like this and figuring out ways that we can make this work better. I was curious about your loss of space. What rationale was given for the loss of that space?
So the loss of the classroom space happened actually before I was here, but my understanding is that Colchester is one of the few districts that is actually growing. Our student population is growing each year. So it was really just a matter of they needed another classroom. And they took the one from the library. And
yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, the storage space happened just this year, and that was again a matter of a growing population and a growing faculty to meet that population. We had a school psychologist coming in who needed an office space, so they decided to split our storage room / office into 2 offices, and so our storage space is pretty much, gone. It's made for some creative solutions around here. We've been we've been getting creative, but yeah, it's a challenge.
I want to give other board members a chance to ask questions. I do have another question, but let me just give everyone a shot here. Okay. I want to ask you kind of the same question I asked Peter earlier, which is, from your perspective, clearly the courier is an issue, so that's noted. But beyond that, do you see any sort of statewide solutions or regulations or changes that would assist you in your job in doing the work that you feel is most important?
Yeah. So, and I'll just say one other thing about the courier service. I think it's wonderful that Kelly is Kelly is always a great collaborator, and I think it's great that she's willing to split that. But then, of course, it's a cost to her personnel as well if we're both splitting that. So again, like, I think it would be great if that courier service could just serve all of the schools as well who wanted to participate. In terms of how the state can be supporting school libraries, I think I would point primarily to what Peter was talking about, just having a voice at the table is something that we're really missing in school libraries. We don't have that advocacy at the state level that we really need in order to shine a light on what we do as school librarians, how we serve our students, the importance of the work that we do in terms of our students' overall education and growth. And therefore we are not able to access the kind of support that we need. I think that a lot of what librarians do is kind of hidden to people who don't know what the job is, don't know what we do, don't know all that goes into the behind the scenes work just to keep the library running, let alone the teaching piece, the leadership piece, the advocacy piece. So I think having that voice at the table is really crucial.
Yeah, that certainly reflects what Peter said and what I've heard in my time at the Department of Libraries. One thing Scott Murphy said when he was at the Department as State Librarian is that we are the Department of Libraries, not the Department of Public Libraries. And so I think that one of the things we've tried to do over the last several years is begin to establish that relationship with schools in a productive way. But what you've said and what Peter said is duly noted, that position at AOE sounds like it's pretty vital for school libraries. So that is noted. Jeanette, I see that you have your hand up. Oh, wait, you did. Jeanette, did you have a question?
Well, yeah, I did. I wanted to go back to the question raised about courier service for schools. That I know there are a few schools in the courier service right now. If all schools in the state wanted to sign on to courier service, the Department of Library grant subsidy for that would probably fall into a different factoring. And if the Department of Libraries pool of money for those grants did not increase substantially, then that would mean you would have to do a reduction of that subsidy to public libraries, which could get very expensive for everyone. That I don't know if Francis realizes that the courier service is not provided free by the Department of Libraries, that each participating library, right now for public libraries, it comes out to $10 a week. Without that subsidy, it would be $20 a week. And whether schools participated enough in interlibrary loan to make a $20 a week investment in the courier service a reality, because that adds up pretty quickly. And I guess the other side of that question for Tom is would the pool of money for these grants increase along with the number of participating schools?
I think that there's a tendency to look at interlibrary loan sometimes as a zero-sum game, in that you're saying we're investing in our collections. Why should we lend these books to people who aren't in our community, who aren't paying taxes? So I think if you extend that argument to the Courier, you can say, well, and I'm not trying to minimize what you're saying. I actually am getting to a point here, that you can say, well, there's a limited pool of money available to subsidize the Courier system. So therefore, if we add more people to the system, then we will be in a position of having to pay more money. There'll be more traffic on that system, et cetera, et cetera. So from my perspective, I think that the greater the demand and the more libraries that are in the system, the more argument there is for increasing funding for that, because money follows need, right? And so if you express the need and you say, hey, we've got all these school libraries that are not getting the materials that they need, here's a really efficient way to not have to have libraries purchase the same materials at multiple locations. But again, and that sort of leads into something that is appropriate for today, which is that kind of joint collection development and building collections in certain locations that would be possible if you had the free-flowing, free, fully paid for courier system. I have to be careful about advocating here, but I certainly think that that would be a valuable investment for the state of Vermont to be able to go to every school library, every academic library, and every public library that would like to participate in the Courier. That does exist in other states. I think that we have made significant progress. Thanks very much to April Shaw for pushing that and making that happen. Of course, all the participants in the Courier system, we have reached well over 100 libraries in the state and are continuing to build that every year. So we are building slowly. I think that there are opportunities for seeking additional funding for that. That remains to be seen, but I do think that there's a tendency to think of this as us cutting the pie into smaller and smaller pieces. But I don't want to discount the possibility that we may be able to make the pie quite a bit bigger based on the demand for this service. So this is good, and this is why we're having this working group, is to be able to hear voices that are saying, hey, we want this, right?
I also have to add that we use the Courier. We have 2 stops a week, and that's great. But we are also mailing out books through Clover to libraries who aren't on the system, and that costs more money than it would if they were in Clover and the Courier system. There's one library that's fairly close to us that we are mailing out 3 items a month or more to, and trust me, that's like another $9–10 a month just to that one library. We keep on saying join, 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 and they don't. So it's not just the courier costs, it is postal costs that add up as well. And whether you're on the courier or not, you've still got postal costs.
Right. Altruism can get cut short when it smacks into finances. So I think that we're in the process of building a long-term project here of eventually having a true statewide courier system. So a barrierless ILL, which is kind of the dream and something that we're working hard at the Department of Libraries. So
Bravo.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we're just, we've taken those first few steps. So Kelly, you have a comment or question?
Despite those comments, my offer still stands, Francis.
Thank you, Kelly.
Okay, we have about 2 minutes. Why don't we break for 2 minutes and then we'll come back, and I believe Randall. No, I'm sorry. Karen, you're next. So if you won't mind, let's take a 2-minute break and come back at 11:15. Okay, great. Thank you, Francis.
Thank you.
I think our 2 minutes are up. All set?
I'm set.
Great.
Sorry.
Okay.
I made the fastest step ever just to make sure that no one was killing each other out there. Everything's fine.
All right. Again, thanks to everyone for taking time out of your day to be here and participate in the meeting. Karen, same instructions as everyone else. Feel free to summarize your testimony in any way you like. Be sure to introduce yourself so we know who you are.
Perfect. I'm Karen McCalla. I am the school librarian at Mill River Union School, which is a 7 through 12 high school just south of Rutland. We have somewhere over 300 students right now. And so there you go. That's the biography stuff. Collection is somewhere between like 10,000 and 15,000 volumes, but it depends on how we count. We have been doing a fairly massive deselection process in our nonfiction this year. It had been, we do that really regularly, but we have been very deliberate this year to peel off anything that is sort of not narrative. Those items just don't get used very much. And so that has been a good change. The nonfiction is looking a lot brighter and more exciting, which is fun for kiddos. Our fiction collection is all genreified. So that makes it really easy for our students to find what they need and what they're browsing for, which feels very helpful. We have a fairly large collection of graphic novels and manga because it is very popular with our students. So we collect heavily in that area. So the rest of my written testimony has lots of like somewhat nitpicky details about collections type stuff. But I think what I want to spend my speaking time talking about is more areas where I'm excited for changes on the state level, hopeful changes on the state level. So one thing that I'd love to see some state support to explore is ways that schools and public libraries can take advantage of sort of economies of scale. So I am blessed to have a full-time assistant. I am also concerned for whether I will have that full-time assistant in the future. Our budgets for next year are looking really, really thin. And I am definitely in the minority for people who have staffing help. And so it seems as though a lot of librarians around the state are trying to do similar things. And we do such a great job already of sharing and collaborating. I am wondering about other ways where we could make that even more deliberate so that we're not all trying to reinvent the wheel. And certainly each one of our libraries and each one of our schools serves a very specific population, and they can be very different. But it would be really cool if there was a way for people who wanted to participate to create like a little capsule collection, like a capsule wardrobe, if you're a shopper, of like, these are things that came out in the last 6 months that my students have really loved, that meet these diversity benchmarks that we've really been trying to build out, for example. Could be a huge time saver. I tend, at least in the past couple of years, my budget has gotten so small that the majority of stuff that we get comes from Junior Library Guild. And they have done a great job of stepping up, I think, with a lot of feedback from libraries around the country of making their selections a lot more diverse. So that has been a good way to get books onto our shelves. but it might be fun to explore different ways where we could not reinvent the wheel for everyone who's trying to achieve a lot of the same goals. Echoing the advocacy thing again, so that AOE representative, I think, was a really important position, and thinking about ways where we can return to having that voice at the table at the AOE, and then also things that the DOL used to be able to do but isn't able to do anymore. I'm sort of thinking about like material review sessions that used to be coordinated. Those were helpful, I felt like. Wanting to put in the plug for some kind of way that we can do a courier system for schools. I don't have enough loans to need like 2 pickups a week on the courier system, but somehow creating a way where we can plug into the interlibrary loan system in a way that's not the Postal Service. When I do borrow for my students through Clover, when I'm on Clover, I try to borrow from other school libraries because I feel like then I'm not asking a courier library to send me an item, but there are definitely times where there's no other schools who have that title. And so then I'm putting a courier library in a situation where they need to mail me a title, and I know that costs them money. Our mailing costs can also get really high. The start of this year, we were like interlibrary loaning more than 20 items in a month, probably, which is really high for us. I know for public libraries, that sounds like a drop in the bucket, but for us and for our school and for our small community of students, it was a lot. And that was just a lot of mailing costs. So some way to do more of that sharing. It really feels like that publics and schools were trying to solve a lot of the same problems. And I would love to see us get to a place where we can be even more deliberate in sharing things that work and creating things that other libraries can take. So, and that's going to be the end of my testimony, but I'll happily take questions.
Thank you, Karen. Materials review noted. We will discuss that. I also want to compliment you on your hedgehog mask. It's very fun. Yes.
I love hedgehogs. Thank you.
Yes. So questions from the board? Jeanette?
Well, I'll go. Karen, you kind of touched on it. In small towns, small budgets, you have a public library, you have a school library, and collaboration between the school librarian and the public librarian on collection development, where you don't need 2 copies of the same book a block apart. You could double your collection if you both bought separate sets of books and then worked out a way to move them back and forth. I know it's easier when you're both the school librarian and the public librarian to do that. And that means staff time to coordinate meetings and all. But ultimately, it can work out if you have 2 people that are willing to put in the time and effort. Also, sharing the same circulation system where both your collections show up on one search is tremendously helpful, again, in collection development. I didn't know if you were doing any of those kind of things, how feasible it is with the staffing situations, but just some questions there.
Definitely. So we're really blessed. So Mill River is so we're in North Clarendon, and North Clarendon does not really have a town center. And so we're relatively far away from our public library, and it's open not very many hours. We take students from 6 official sending towns and then a lot of other sending towns who have school choice. So Wallingford is our biggest public library, and they are relatively well supported as a public library, and we collaborate nicely with them and trade books back and forth. All of the other public libraries just do not have staff there enough hours, and their collections are smaller than ours, to make much headway in collaborating with them. Two of our towns, Shrewsbury and Tinmouth, they have a public library, but they have no paid librarian. It's just volunteers. And so trying to put that together into a way to collaborate is tricky, since the majority of our sending towns are quite rural and far away. Tinmouth is 40 minutes from here. Shrewsbury is 40 minutes from here. They're not in the same direction. So. Yeah. And then you also mentioned the sort of shared system. I don't know, this would be a super heavy lift because everyone has their favorites. And I think the state has made some progress because a lot of libraries are already on Catamount, but thinking about creating a single statewide standardized circulation system would make sharing so much easier. So anyway, so that's a plug for that, sort of, except there are certain features I really want it to have. So everyone would have their thing.
I see Denise has a question, but I just want to ask this. You mean outside of the capability of Clover? I think to some extent we've solved some of those issues.
So you have solved some of those issues, but like for example, so imagine in a perfect world where money was no object and we could do things magically with a wand. It would be really cool if there was a magical one system that my students could look at that would show them all the books that are available all across the state, and they could request an interlibrary loan without me necessarily needing to do anything for them. In the world as it exists now, that is not at all true. So my students in general don't search Clover at all. So how things usually work is they are looking for a book. We don't have the book. They come tell me, we wish we had this book. Then I go look in Clover. So it's a very like mediated process for them. So again, I know that creates a lot of magical thinking, but it could be really cool if it was more of a system where any library in the state could see any other library in the state's things. That's all, including school libraries.
Right. This is not a technology problem. I just want to point that out.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. The technology exists. I think it's like the will, the money, like everybody has their own feature that they want kind of things. There's a lot of other hurdles that are not a technology hurdle, 100%.
Right. And I will remind everyone that we do not have governance power over libraries and we can't tell them what ILS to select. So that's where that magic wand comes in. But Denise, I see that you have a question.
Hi. I don't know many of you here. I'm actually fairly new to Vermont, a year and a half. And I work at the university. So while I am a heavy public library user, COVID made my entry into using my public library slow, given the circumstances under which I arrived here. So my greatest familiarity with using public libraries is Connecticut, where I lived for 20 years, which does have a pretty robust system of sharing items amongst the public libraries and using catalogs that allow a patron to see who has what and requesting things on their own. And the funding for actually moving the items around does not come out of the public library's budgets, which is sort of interesting. So I guess what I'm trying to say is a lot of the acronyms that are being used, like Clover and things, I have absolutely no idea what anyone's talking about. So I feel badly listening to all of this. And I clearly don't understand the systems either within school media libraries or public libraries here in Vermont. And I'm wondering, I'm not going to take up the time here, but if somebody could educate some of us who don't work in those realms, either with some paperwork we can read or send us somewhere on a website. So I know I would feel better prepared listening to everyone going forward than I do currently. So I'm just putting that out there. Maybe I'm not the only one in this situation, but thanks.
I think I can give a 1 minute at least a brief explanation that will be useful for everyone here, because I think you're probably not the only person in this situation. So we, at the Department of Libraries, we implemented a system called Clover, which allows for interlibrary loans to be requested through a software solution where other items available can be seen and requested, but it can be a little bit limited depending on how available it is locally. So the integration into an ILS, for example, like being able to see those at the user level, does not typically exist. Okay,
Is
a
there
minute was
information?
way too optimistic.
Yeah.
I'm already getting in the weeds here. So
No, I'm just wondering, like, as everyone was talking, I went back to Connecticut because I thought, oh, how is Connecticut funding theirs? And I can find that information online. I'm wondering if there's anything online here where I can go and see how this courier system works or how the funding is, because I don't want to take up time here. And
right.
Thanks.
Just very briefly, the Green Mountain Library Consortium partnered with the Department of Libraries to pilot a courier system where we started with, I want to say, around 50 or so libraries, and found that that was successful. That transitioned fully to the Department of Libraries, and then we began building that system up to, I think we have 111 libraries. Actually, we may have added some since then. So we are building that, and as you know, 117 public libraries, April tells me, and 6 schools. So we are, and 2 academics. So yes, thank you, April. So we are slowly building that up. The fact is that my understanding of Connecticut is that that is a very old and long-standing system in the state, and it's funded through the legislature directly. I do know that I think it was Ken Wiggin, is that correct? Yep. A few years ago, they took some pretty major cuts to that system, and it limited that. So there's always political considerations to this, and always financial considerations. And so what we're trying to do is build this up, and obviously we would love to see something like Connecticut that doesn't have those barriers, but that takes time, and that's kind of what we're looking at right now. So
yeah, no, this is helpful. And I didn't mean, I'm not trying to compare or say, hey, why aren't we doing like, it's just,
not at all.
That's my only point of reference. So I'm trying to understand how everything's working. So I appreciate that. Thanks, Tom.
Yep. When I lived in California, you could go on your local library site, you could check something, and it would get sent to your local library. You pick it up in a couple days. So yeah, coming to Vermont, it's a different system. I think we value local control here in Vermont, and I don't think it's that we want to minimize that, but at the same time, I think that there is room for us to do better by the citizens of the people of Vermont. So, but Karen, we kind of edged into your time a little bit here with this discussion. Do you have any other comments? I want to be aware of the time here, and I just want to see if there's any other questions for Karen before we move on. Looks like there are none. Karen, thank you so much for providing testimony today. And
thank you.
It was very interesting. Next up on the agenda, we have Randall Smathers. Randall, we all set with Randall? Saw Randall a minute ago. There you are, Randall.
Oop, I have more than one mute button, so pardon, I just had to turn them all off. Yeah, I'm Randall Smathers. I'm director at Rutland Free Library. I have been here just over 9 years, 3+ as assistant director, and the rest as director. We are by Vermont
Randall,
standards.
What's that? Just real quick, would you mind turning your camera on so we can see you?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was.
So upper right,
yep.
Just to the left of the leave.
How's that working?
There you are.
Okay.
Awesome.
Again, I have both a software and a hardware solution for turning on my equipment, and I'd only got half of it. So again, Randall Smathers, director, Rutland Free Library. By Vermont standards, we are a large public library. We have 80,000 items in print. We are the largest library in Catamount by some margin. We are in Green Mountain Library Consortium and take advantage of its advantage. Sorry for the pun. Advantage program. It is very popular with our readers. Last year during COVID, 20% of our loans were via download or streaming. We also offer Canopy, Freegal. We're able to do this because we have a large endowment that is restricted solely to materials, and so we're kind of a one-off that way, and I do appreciate that. So not trying to brag, but we do have a big collection because we're able to. We have 4 MLS librarians, myself, the assistant director, adult librarian, children's librarian, and each have hands-on with part of the collection except myself. I do sit on the reference desk about 15 hours a week, so I'm a very active director, but I do no longer manage the collection since I moved to the director's position. Just to hit on some of the things that have been mentioned previous before I jump into my testimony, we annually loan about 6,000 items via the Catamount Consortium and another 800 or 900 via ILL. So we're getting very close to 7,000, between 6,500 and 7,000 loans a year, which is about 2,000 items a year more than we bring back into our library, which makes us a substantial net lender. We're happy to do that. It's a little frustrating the way the system is set up because we are punished for that financially. We are spending $3,000 a year for the courier system alone, because in order to manage our load, which is mostly outgoing, that puts us into the, we're in the deluxe category. So we pay all sorts of extra fees for the privilege of loaning our items out to other libraries, which does get me into the testimony. I'm going to just summarize the highlights. We are huge supporters of interlibrary loan, of sharing resources, and in one respect, we're very much a test bed, because when Catamount was designed, it was designed really to test the ability of doing interlibrary loans, hopefully at some point statewide. Catamount's been around now for several years. I feel like it's a mature system, and we're really bumping up against the limits of it. Rutland Free, we are completely out of space, and we're a big building. We're 25,000 square feet, but we're out of space on the ground floor where we need to be handling materials, coming and going, shipping items, because our circulation area was not built with lending to 20 odd other libraries in mind. And we've wildly outgrown that to the point where we're looking at doing, at a minimum, a $2 million renovation of our building, in large part so we can handle the increased demand from outside of our building. So it's a really, again, we're supportive of it, but it's a really big problem from my desk, being able to meet the demand. I would suggest that part of that is due to the fact that the state courier system and interlibrary loan system is designed as a one-size-fits-all, and it's very much not. I've been talking to some of the other directors of other large libraries, and we're all facing the same thing, which is because we have the big collections and we have the books available, it's where people tend to start ordering when they're looking for items for their collections or for their patrons. And so it's really a hub and spoke system, except it's not designed as such. And I would strongly encourage, as the state looks at how we can better do some of this, to really consider it as a hub and spoke. What are the hubs? What do they need to get this done? How can we maximize it? We're at 3 shipments a week through the courier. We could easily handle 5, except I can't really afford 5. I don't have the staffing to support 5. But with a little bit better support and a little better organization, some top-down organization, a library like Rutland could easily handle 5 shipments a week into the courier system, and that would take the load off of some smaller libraries. So certainly that's an aspect. Catamount has tried to address these concerns, and it's been partially successful. But at one point in the summer, we had 9 full carrier bins come into the library on one day, and it's just not sustainable. The Clover catalog, is a good step forward, but right now about 100 libraries in the state use Koha Bywater as their ILS. And it is unfortunate that the decision was made to not build Clover in such a way that it was logged, fully connected. And to give you some idea of the challenges there, typically when a patron comes to me and I'm on the ref desk and they're looking for a book, they can't find it. I do a search in-house. Should we have a copy? Is it just misplaced? If it's not there, then I do a Catamount search. Catamount recently added a feature where you do, so you don't automatically search Catamount. You search in-house, then you do a separate search for Catamount. If it's not in Catamount, then because Clover is not integrated with Catamount, you do another complete search in Clover. And if it's not in Clover, then we go to WorldCat and we bring it in from out of state. So for a single search, we can be doing as many as 4 separate searches, which is, I understand the limitations, but honestly, Bywater Koha is the default ILS, and it would be really nice if we could figure out a way to make a system that's used by 100+ libraries in the state kind of the standard, just as a starting point, just in that effort to make it easier for us to share items. Let's see, what else did I have on this? Yeah, so I'm just going to go through my little proposal at the bottom as a starting point. We should be encouraging statewide borrowing. We want our user base to be able to use us. And right now, honestly, folks who can afford it, for the most part, are going to Amazon because they have that choice. So it creates a very uneven playing field. Folks who rely on library services are very much getting second-class service, which is A, unfortunate, B, unfair, and C, hazardous to the long-term health of public libraries in the state. If libraries are where you go because you can't afford Amazon or some other streaming service or download service, we have a real problem long-term. Public demand has been very strong. We're not the most active borrower in Catamount. I believe that is Brattleboro. But given the opportunity to get books from elsewhere, the public is happy to do it. Again, 20% of our loans this past year were via download. Without COVID, we're looking at about 15%, but still 15% of our checkouts remotely is unthinkable 10 years ago. We need to be ready for this kind of thing. And then we're a big library and we see it in our loans going out. It doesn't affect our users, but I would encourage this group to think about it. We buy typically a big book, a popular one. We'll buy 2 or 3 copies for our general collection. We'll buy at least 1, if not 2 large print collections. We'll buy an audio book on CD, and then through GMLC, we'll pick up a couple of copies, at least a couple copies for download. So we're looking at buying 7 copies of a book. Again, we have a huge endowment. We can afford that. But most libraries in the state can't. And so what happened when the state decided to cut support for the central library function of Vermont libraries is they went, hey, we saved a bunch of money. But really they didn't. What they did is they increased the spending and just dispersed it through all the individual libraries. And so if we can find a way to convince the state that it's a false economy, sure, it saves money on the state budget, but it increases the load and increases unfairness and makes it harder for people to access libraries, information, and do what we're supposed to do, that would be an enormous step. And, you know, good luck to the folks at the state library for getting that point across. But that's not me trying to twist the numbers. That's really, if you look at the amount spent to try to provide basic services that used to come out of the central library, I would just at the top of my head guess that it's 5 to 10 times more cost for a poorer product since the state just chose not to centralize these services. With that, I'm going to stop and take questions. Thanks for the conversation, by the way. I've really been enjoying listening to it today.
Thank you, Randall. I'll just say first that it's really great to hear your perspective on this stuff, and it's good for us at the Department of Libraries to be pushed. I think that's the role of folks out there, is to identify issues and then bring them to us, because that's how we get around to solving problems and figuring out the best path forward. So I do want to, again, thank you for bringing these issues to us. I have
Well, and
a
I just want to make it clear, this isn't a critique of the job you folks are doing. Your budget was cut huge, and you'll know the numbers better than I, but there was a huge cut a few years back. And what you guys do with the money you have available is great. I just think it was a false economy on the part of the state. I think it was a terrible decision to gut VT Lib.
Well, you won't find any dissent here, I can tell you that much. But no, I would never take it that way. What I'm getting at is that I don't want you to even feel that you need to make that explanation. That we want to hear from everybody, and we want to hear about problems and issues, because that's the stuff that we can address through policy and possibly through funding requests. So that is fantastic. I have a couple questions, but I want to give other members of the board a chance to ask a question.
Okay, so mine's not so much a question as a comment, and that is that I would agree 100% with Randall that a single shared catalogue for Vermont would be the best and the easiest to work with.
Yep. Again, this is kind of in Karen's magic wand territory,
Yep,
because we can't compel anyone to do anything regarding what ILS they select. So we have tried through Clover to solve the technological problem of federated searching. Although, Randall, to your point, I think that, yeah, one does have to jump through a number of hoops in order to find materials in other libraries.
Well,
so,
and the question then, right now our discussion is, should we enable Clover searching for our patrons on our website? And this gets kind of my QWERTY comment in the actual written testimony. We really can't, because we need, in order to be able to manage the shipping and the processing, we need people to be starting in Catamount. And so we need to force people through that 4-step process. Do we have it in-house? Yes, no. Do we have it available through Catamount? Yes, no. Do we have it available through Clover? Yes, no. And then finally, we go to WorldCat. And WorldCat is crazy expensive because you're shipping, you know, goodness knows where. But the chances of us not being able to find a book are slim and none. But if we just open it up and let the public do the searching, which would be terrific, and for our power users, it would be, you know, they'd love to have that ability, but we're really concerned that they might start with WorldCat because they don't want to do 4 searches. They might start with Clover. And so from a cost containment standpoint, we just can't let people take advantage of what should be a pretty basic service, which is, yeah, you do the search, and we'll, then after you do the search, then we'll say, okay, this is where we'll get it from.
It feels like there's a technological solution here that would direct you, where one could either have or create a discovery layer, essentially, that would go in order through those things in the order that you want. That's technologically possible. I do wonder, like, how much that would cost, first of all. And second of all, how applicable that would be across multiple library systems. So we are certainly working with our vendor to improve the system that we have. Again, I don't want to get on my soapbox here and complain about the state of the industry, but I do feel that that, to your point about Amazon, we could be doing better in that region. But I think this is great, because this gives us a lot to chew on and much to think about. Again, I think fundamentally the problem here is money. That if we could fully support the courier system without charge. That might alleviate some issues here. Please don't take this as being snarky, because I don't mean it this way, but when you were talking about, you lend about 7,000 items. If you were sending those through the post office, that's probably $28,000 in ILL costs, roughly. $4 an item, which is probably low, might be as much as 35. So in that respect, and I realize that may be a false economy, because your demand would decline if you weren't using the courier system. So,
well, and just so you understand, I mean, you guys can't see it because it's in my library, and it's my day off, so I'm at home today. Our shipping area, to make Catamount work, we have a designated section of shelving for every single library in Catamount, because we ship enough volume. It's a rare day that we don't have something in most of those shelves. Certainly for the bigger libraries, we'll have a stack. We'll have 8 or 10 items that might be going out on a given day. I need to find shelf space for every one of those libraries. Now, that wasn't designed into the building we were in when it was turned into a library in 1935, but it's what I need now, and we're completely out of space. So we're looking at renovating or moving. But the big driver for the renovation, one of the big drivers for the renovation, is to create space so that we can handle the demand for Catamount. So yes, $35,000 to ship is a lot. $1.5 million to redo the ground floor of the library is a lot more. And we're literally at that point. Until Catamount agreed to change how they do their ordering, I was at the point of having to look at leaving Catamount, because we couldn't handle the demand. We're at that point.
This was a concern of your predecessor when Catamount was being created, and I don't think this is isolated to your library, as Wendy said. I think that libraries have changed a lot, although we do have some wonderful pictures of the Vermont book wagon from the 1920s and 30s that I don't know if you've seen those, but they are awesome. I see Andy has a question.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Randall. This is Andy's hobby horse question of the moment, just for sort of data gathering. So thank you for your testimony. You focused, primarily on this notion of ILL and equity, and I'm just wondering, so I have some comparable information between other collections. Can you talk a bit about the distinctions between digital and print circulation amongst your patrons?
Well, yeah, as I mentioned, last year we hit 20% digital circulation. That was driven in part by COVID. It looks like we're going to settle in at about 15%. But if you go back 5 years, we were at about 3 to 5% of our patrons. A big part of that is the Libby app. It used to be that there was about a 3-step process. You'd sign in, then you'd download the item, then you'd transfer it to your Kindle. Libby is very much, it's one step, it's within the app. Typically, we used to have 4, 5, 6 stops before somebody really understood how to use it. In a lot of cases, today, 95% of the time, we explain how to use Libby, and we never hear from the patron with a, yeah, they might come in and talk to us, but they're not saying, how do I use this device again? Audiobook downloads has been far and away the largest driver. 2/3 of our downloads are for audiobook versions as opposed to ebook. We did have Acorn when it was possible through our Be Digital. We're using Canopy. Canopy is terrific if you're into art house films and things like that. But we are really seeing a drop off in our DVD borrowing because people are using, Netflix or what have you. And often we get requests now for specifically for video, and it's only stuff that's available on a given service. It's not even printed to DVD. So we are seeing the move. It would be great if we could offer something more mainstream for video offerings. But we're having really, really strong return on downloads right now. And I foresee that staying strong.
Okay, my final question.
Yeah, and just one last point on that. Very, very few users who only download. A huge majority of our download users, sometimes they read print, sometimes they download. So it's serving the patron as they wanted. It's not so much serving different slices of our demographics.
Okay, and my other question relates to reference materials and the prevalence of print versus digital in your collection.
Yeah, and I echo what I heard earlier. Our print reference collection has shrunk probably by it's down to maybe a third of what it was. And if it wasn't for the Vermont statutes, it would be less than that. I mean, the statutes they're 2+ shelves right now. It doesn't make any sense to spend a lot of money on print because it's almost by definition out of date by the time you get it on the shelf.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Randall.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions for Randall? Great. Okay, so we're running slightly late here, so I am going to keep you past 12 for everyone who can stay. Randall, thank you so much for your testimony. Very interesting. Great to hear your perspective on this. Up next is Susan O'Connell.
Hi, hi everybody. I am up next, but we're short-staffed today, and I'm actually on the CERC desk from noon. From noon until 2. So I'm wondering if I could go later on in the day instead. I have from 2 to 4 available again.
Yeah, that'd be perfect. I think we can bring you back at 2:45 if that works for you.
That'd be perfect.
We'll just move the rest of the agenda back 15 minutes at that point. Okay, well, at this point, it's 11:58, 11:59. So why don't we recess until 2 o'clock? And so the meeting will still be in session. So there's a couple of ways you can handle that. You can either leave yourself here in the meeting and turn off your camera and microphone. I would suggest that. Or you can leave the meeting and come back just before 2, and we will let you back in and give you that. So it's up to you, whatever you'd like to do. I will be leaving myself here in the meeting with my camera off and my microphone off. So either way, just a technical issue, detail there. So any way you want to handle that, but this meeting needs to remain in session so that we can recess and then restart at 2 o'clock. Okay. Just come back if you do leave. Come back through the same link you used earlier today. Okay.
Thank you, Tom.
Any comments before we break? We good? Everyone happy?
Thank you, and thanks everybody.
Okay, great. We'll see everyone at 2 o'clock.